All right, what about Le Havre here? Obviously, not my kind of game. In a lot of ways. All right, let's see if what we can think about it to say about it. I mean, obviously, look, it's lived through a certain test of fire, and that's kind of my minimum bar for Euros now is, well, geez, it's got to be ranked, fairly highly. It's got to have about 8 point score on BGG, because I find that the ones that I pick up that don't have that, I'm just not happy with. But I'm not happy with this one either. Not for perfectly willing to accept it's a fine game. But here's the thing. It's thematic in the sense that it has nothing to do with the subject matter, but everything kind of is linked. Kind of reminds me of Pax Porfiriana in this way. I don't feel like I'm in any way doing harbor master type duties in this game, but I don't feel like I'm in the position of somebody who's making those kind of choices. I feel like I'm in the position of somebody who's optimizing over a whole bunch of cards. That's what I feel. I have this whole span of things, all with special abilities, and I have to memorize what all of the ones that are on the tableau do. And, we're talking about 30 or more cards at the end of the game. Initially, I thought it was a lot of fun for about half the game, and I'll probably get a kick out of playing the short game if I can ever convince myself to just do that. But like I said in the wrap, at least from my limited perspective of a couple of playings, the short game looks like it really misses out on a lot of big factors in the game, like the ships. Here I am running a harbor, and I can't have a ship until, very late in the game. It does actually make sense. Hey, I'm dealing with, the internal side of the harbor. I'm dealing with these warehouses where the ships drop stuff off. They're ships that aren't mine, right? It's just when whatever the outgoing ships mean. And, you can link them to, hey, I'm delivering goods, I get money. Whatever those actual, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense because nothing's coming in on them. Those ships that are coming in come in with some stuff and you're not allowed to deliver other stuff out and stuff like that. So if you start to dissect it, you start to see flaws in whatever simulation there is here, which I'd say is none. But if you don't do that, if you just take it as, okay, screw it, this is an abstract game with kind of a story overlaid on it, and the cards make sense, the bakery makes bread out of grain, that makes sense, you gotta kill cows to eat them, and then they don't reproduce anymore. There's all kind of little stuff like that makes sense in a thematic sense, in the sense that it means nothing to me, but some people seem to love that kind of thing. But it doesn't tell a story. It doesn't help you by giving you a context that would lead what you'd expect to be good play, right? At least not one of any significance. I mean, collect buildings, process goods. Yeah, all that kind of helps, but when it comes down to trying to formulate what you should do, either opportunistically or even in long-range plans, if those are certainly possible. There is plenty of information at the beginning of the game that you can plot out, the main flow of your game right from the beginning. It also does some really nice things, though. I mean, like a little bit of randomization with this, with the special buildings, with the regular buildings even, in terms of the order that they're going to come out as available and for the town to buy. All of that provides a nice amount of variety that you could go into the game, I guess, with a general strategy, but what you might find is that some general strategies may be advantaged by the distributions. Maybe the cokery doesn't come out when you need it to. Maybe the wharves are buried too far down and you're not going to be able to build ships for half the game, which is actually what's happened in both games that I've seen. Is the wharves they were the the blocking point. They were the boot plug in the way of this whole thing. So I compare that to another heavy, to me, semi-Euro-ish type thing, which is the 18XX games. Those are, those caught my eye early on and caught my imagination. And they seem very much about things. I'm building rail on a board, connecting cities. There isn't a lot of random little crap there. It's mainly about what the different players choose to do. Whereas this, the players have some effect on you. They can sit on a building and block you from using it, for example. Or they can grab an offer that you really wanted on your next action. But largely you're just competing for a set of resources that are sitting out there to be used. And, there are some things that don't make sense, like, hey, I went in to order a ship, and now I'm going to stand in the doorway and direct the warehouses to deliver stuff to me, but I'm not going to let anyone else build that ship. Build that ship that I ordered. Build a different ship. They're not allowed to go there. But if I left the doorway, that shipping company suddenly becomes able to service another person. And stuff like that is just weird. But okay, that's part of the conceit of the game, is that it is this abstract game that's, well linked in terms of making the actions have names that help you, look for the right card. I want the granary, I want the bakery because I have grain. So I know which card to look for. But it doesn't really help me in any other way than that. But yeah, there's this pile of information that's out there, humongous amounts of information, all very varied. Now, my guess would be that that becomes fairly easy for most people to cope with after a few plays. However, I know that I don't have that capability. I've played quite a decent number of games, maybe a dozen, of Age of Renaissance, and it never has sunk into me what the hell I'm supposed to do when I'm, and I face competent people and I'm in last place every time, just kind of sitting there saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I can play other incompetents and I can do okay, but if I sit down with a bunch of competent people, I feel completely lost. If I sit down with one competent person at the table, they win the game, and the rest of us have kind of fun because we're fighting for second, and that's okay. But it really sucks to be the only lame ass at the table. And that's how I feel this would probably happen. Now, there is an alternative to being able to get a lot of games in with other people, because the thing is not solo playable the way I did it. That alternative is the solitaire game. They don't give rules for victory for the solitaire game, but I guess that's okay, because hey, you've got a score at the end of the game. You can keep a running record of all your scores and see, am I improving? You could write down what your strategy is if you can start to formulate those and really kind of learn the game that way. It may not all apply. I have the feeling that the game changes significantly among different numbers of players. I played it once 2-player, played it this time solo 5-player, and oh boy, it was different. Things come out about the same time, but the food demands on you in 2 players felt a lot harsher than in 5-player. Notably, the food progresses very quickly in the 2-player game, and you must go after food for that. But in the 5-player game, you can kind of go after, at least for most of the game, well, somebody maybe visits my village and gives me some food, or my buildings. Somebody, maybe I do something that gets me some profit, so I get a little bit of cash. I can spend some of that on food. You're not caught in this death spiral if you don't go after food in the 5-player game. Obviously, some people will want to. It's economical, and the nature of the game, with the building up of resources into these different offerings until somebody finally says, yeah, that's good enough. I've always kind of liked that kind of mechanism for fun of play. I mean, I like that in Age of Renaissance it actually has something like that. I'm trying to remember what it is. Something where something sits out there long enough that it becomes good enough to get. I don't know. A number of games have that, but I think this does it very, very well. And like I said, I really enjoyed the first half of the game, and I think I would actually get a kick out of the short game, except I'd feel cheated that I didn't really get very far in it. But it's designed for someone like me without the same, mental issues about completion and doing the full thing. It's not. It's too much for me. I'm not able to make sense out of the level of tableau that there is. Now, again, if I played this, once a week, if this became my group's big go-to game, and I had a group and stuff like that, then it probably would be okay. But it fits that kind of Euro aspect of. I guess we're going to play this really big until most of the players kind of understand the game, and then we'll move on to something else. Once they kind of feel like they've played out the strategies, because that's all there is to it. Now, for me, I feel like I'd rather enjoy other aspects than just exploring how the mechanisms operate together. That's not my interest in a game. My interest is actually probably the player interaction, which is weird for somebody who plays solo, but it happens. And this game has some, but I don't think that it's a tremendous amount. I could see somebody say, if Table Talk's allowed, pointing out, oh no, you don't want to go to my thing, you can get more off this one. If I look at the different, let me look at what I got here, because this sparked a lot of my thoughts, and now I've got nothing on my mind. When I do the actual formal review, I feel like these were a bad idea. I should have just stuck to the old wraps, but people wanted a formal summation of what I think of. Well, I can't remember it. It's in the playthrough is what I'm thinking of, and especially the wrap. I was on a roll there, man, and then I had to cut it off to give you this shit, right? Okay. So, one of the big decision points, I guess, is kind of this: do you go for an engine to build your late game capabilities, or do you just kind of collect victory points for the buildings, and they might help fuel your current situation? Another is how big to go into commodities. When you throw your commodities down, it feels so great. Hey, let's see, I'll get a whole pile of cows and they'll start producing more, and that's cool. And I think things like that feel nice as you're doing them, but eventually you end up with this humongous pile of stuff you got no way to score. And that's, again, a thing that the more you play it, the more you get the feeling, I guess, for how to fine-tune this so that, you're making the right decisions as to when to switch gears, when to stop just collecting commodities and doing what's opportunistically best at that point, and then start deciding, how am I going to end this game? What are my last couple of moves going to be, I hope, assuming I'm allowed? What's my final move going to be? That's big, Am I planning on doing a big shipping move, on that move where I can do whatever the hell I like, or am I planning on building something huge like a big ship? Both of which can bring a lot of points in at the end of the game. So, there's clearly a lot of different options here, but I almost feel like the only way to access them, to get to any level of minimal competence in the game, just requires playing it a lot. And I guess that's what's really antithetic to my style, because I like buzzing around like a little hummingbird tasting each game. And this is never going to taste good until I get beyond that sort of work level with it. It would be cool to be in a group that wanted to play this a few times in a row real fast. Because then maybe I would have at least this core level of competence in the game that I don't think I'm going to get without them. But it would totally suck to ever walk into a group that most of the people know it. So you've got to kind of learn this game with a group, or else sit alone in solitaire and play a bunch of games of it using the solo rules, which may not be as painful because there's going to be very little coming out. The more people you have, the more demanding the tableau is going to be. The more cards are going to be out, etc. The more things that you have to really focus on to be able to operate the current board appropriately. So it was definitely a mistake for me to play this 5-player the first time solo. But I really did want to see what the difference in the dynamics was, and it is very much there. I think my goal in this game, if I did want to get good at it, would be to play it to the point where I could sit down at a 5-player game and hold my own and do pretty damn well with that whole tableau. All that memorization issue, knowing the game completely, that would be the thing with it. And of course the problem is knowing the game completely doesn't come to you from the lower number of players, because the particular cards that you're going to really understand and know are going to be the ones from the number of players you play. So you play it solo, you're going to be playing with like a lot less deck of buildings available, of the standard buildings available, than if you sit down to you're not going to be able to jump from 1 player to 5-player. You've got to kind of work your way up in terms of that memorization ability. And obviously, if you play something a lot, you get very used to all the stuff. And actually, that is, I think, what Euros most do, is they reward, in terms of making it easier to win, the person who is most familiar with the components of the game and how they interlock. It doesn't really, I don't feel like, and in fact a game would actually be a broken game if there was some killer strategy, right? There may be a few good strategies and a lot of bad ones or something like that, but I feel like the designer's point is more to give you a whole bunch of different options, and then you start winnowing out what works and what doesn't, what kind of things work, and basically you're going to be able to, maybe get 2 dozen plays off a game before, it's not solved in any mathematical sense, but you have kind of this idea that, all right, I'm pretty damn good at this now, and I could keep refining and coming up with strategies that may work against certain situations or whatever. But I've sort of hit a plateau, and I'm not sure it's ever worth going beyond that. I think that's the feeling among Eurogamers, and they will play out a game, get to be good enough at it, and then maybe a little better, and then that's enough for this one. Kind of like, the problem that I have with that is, what the hell, man? There's chess, there's Go. If you want to play one game a lot of times and really learn it, isn't that the one you want to do? One that's for a lifetime? No, it's not. They don't want a lifetime. They want, a few months of playing something heavily. And, I was in groups that did that and kind of got a kick out of it. Never with Euro-type games, with some really awful games. I'm thinking Hammer of Thor here, which we must have played for like a month or two solid, 3 times a week at least. Maybe more than that, and with a guy with really stinky feet. And boy, was that a horrible game. But we had a lot of fun, and I feel like maybe there'd be a lot of fun in this. The dicking over, grabbing stuff, somebody takes that big pile as it's getting richer and richer. Ra is the game that's like it. You can't just grab the pile, but you put something up for an auction when you have an advantage or whatever, when it's a good pile. But the difference in Ra is you can put crap up there in hopes of kind of changing the game state a little bit. You don't have that here. There's just this general progression, and eventually somebody says, yeah, that's good enough, I can make it. That's very much like a stock market, though, I'm going to wait till the price goes down to what Yeah, I'll take that. Or a reverse auction or something. Um, but yeah, I mean, I can understand why people like this. It just does not suit my gaming needs. Certainly not at this point in my life when I have too many games. Uh, and I'm kind of surprised at sort of the reviewers who do a lot of games getting a lot of enjoyment out of this. Now, the games they play probably are much, much shorter, so they can focus on a couple that feel like they have something and then go into more and more depth in them and see, yeah, this is able to keep up my interest after, 30 plays or whatever. It's still okay. I've played it enough that I know what I'm going to do for the most part until I'm faced with a tricky situation. But that gives me the same feeling as 18XX. The thing that gives me the difference is this doesn't hook me right away. I don't feel like right away I have this insight into what kinds of things I want to do. I just have sort of this very general and vague feeling. And I feel like with XX, right away I knew what it represented and what the mechanisms were that allowed me, from a knowledge of the actual subject matter that it covers. I've got stocks, I've got companies that I can either, run well and the stock should do fairly well, or if I run it, real hard for big money, maybe I'm kind of weakening the company and the stock's inflated, but then I can kind of get rid of it. That all makes sense. There's sort of these general principles. And here, there are no general principles that stand out. XX, there were general principles that stand out right away. I run a company, I pay out, it goes up in stock value, and I make money. That's good. Trains. Uh-oh. Maybe I have to play once to see, you're fucked if you do that. This, I don't really see too much except, there were a couple of players who got screwed mismanaging money. That's like mismanaging trains. And, that was pretty obvious that is a problem. The one that's not so much a problem, that wasn't so much obvious, was you're sitting there with some resources and somebody's sitting on what you need and you need to do something else and you end up taking a secondary option and that kind of breaks what you were planning. I think that makes for a lot of interesting decision making in the game, but it doesn't make it clear where somebody took that wrong turn, But yeah, and there's, the question of, do you want to go big on loans, grab a bunch of loans, especially if that courthouse is out. Because it doesn't really cost you to take out a lot of loans, any more than taking out, say, one loan. You pay just $1 each time it comes around, but if you've taken out a lot of money, presumably you've made a lot off of it. The problem is, you've made a lot off of it may not be money, may not be capital that you can crank as a little investment machine here. You don't have that crank in this game in the same way that I can see it, that you do in most Euros. You don't have that little engine. Everybody's stuff is available to everybody, right? That's kind of cool. I mean, there's design decisions I really like. There's things about this game that I think are so awesome from an intellectual stance outside of playing the game. The problem is, I don't think I have the time and the effort and the energy to want to really explore the game to the degree that it is available. So, mixed feelings on it. I definitely will kick around because I do think it looks like it provides something that most of the Euros I have actually don't. Obviously, people compare it to Agricola. I haven't played Agricola. I bought this I want one or the other, right? Well, this one looks kind of cool, and I got it a little cheaper than I could get Agricola with expansions. The expansion was not that impressive. It's just a few more cards in it. Maybe there's more expansions. I know there's the two-player game, but I think the two-player game of this is fine. I think I better stay away from Agricola unless I see it real cheap or with all kinds of stuff in it to make it even more of a headache. It's, you know, I buy these because they're well known and well received, and I can see it in this. Power Grid's another one that I'd say is like XX. It may not be a simulation of the power industry, but it feels very intuitive what I need to do. I can play it and feel like I'm making good decisions, even if I'm not. You know, I can feel like I'm doing good things. I don't tend to feel like I'm just getting shut down. I think it's very easy to get the general gist of the game. And then it becomes the refinements that are the difficult part. That's the case with XX. The general gist is easy. There's a lot of richness there to play around in, but it gives you that good quick start. A game like this, the starting part of the game, the first half of the game, feels fairly easy. But I don't feel like I've got that. I really get some story here that helps drive my whole play of the game in the same sort of way that I did in XX. For some people, XX took playing one game to see someone get dumped on to kind of understand a key element of the game, which is that, yeah, you got to protect yourself in your holdings. You can't just assume that stocks are going to go well. Some XX games aren't that way, though. Some of them are much friendlier. Maybe better starts for someone, but it's hard then to make the transition to, say, 1930. I don't know if I'm missing something that key in this game, something that'll let me comprehend all that tableau without just tons of experience and be able to make that, jump. I can't imagine it, but there are many things beyond my imagination, I think. All right, let's send this one up.